Welcome to the final session of the 2020 Nebraska MTSS Summit. We have enjoyed learning along with you for the last 6 weeks. The content has been simply amazing, and we are thankful for all of you who have attended and or watched the recordings. Speaking of the amazing participants, we want you to know who's joining us today. So as we move to the next slide, we'd like you to take a minute to respond to the following in the chat. If you would please list your name, your location, where are you joining us from today? And then think about this one. If you could have an endless supply of any food, what would you choose? I'll start. My name is Jane Byers, and I work with the amazing Nebraska MTSS team. And if I could have an endless supply of any food right now, I think it would be, for sure, good old Nebraska steak. Yum. Now I'm hungry. So let's see who's here. Go ahead and add your name and that food. New Mexico cheese. Heather Robbins, welcome tonight. Amy Roan, wine. Oh, with wine. Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. Adam, want some chocolate? Ellen, yeah. Nebraska chocolate. Pizza. Dark chocolate. Rita, I'm with you on that one. Mary Jo, tortilla chips and queso dip. Oh, that sounds incredible right now. Brenda, hi Brenda. Nancy, Italian food? Sorry if I missed your food, it's because my chat's going a little bit more quickly. Anyone else? Oh, we have Stacy, Pico, Susan Wiggins. Oh, ice cream, that's always a staple. Chris, ice cream. Casey, hi Casey. Byron, Linda Clavel, peach pie, yum. Anyone else? Amber Smith, Mexican food. That does sound good to me too. Anyone else? All right, well, it looks like we have a good crowd joining us tonight. It's great to have everyone here. And now I kind of have my snack and my meal plan for the next few days. So thanks for helping me kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. And now that we know who's on our call today, let's take a minute to learn about who will be presenting today. On the next slide, it is, oops, did we lose our slide sharing?
Yep, so we can see the team.
Oh, yeah, good idea, Laura. Okay, so it's my pleasure to get to briefly introduce our Nebraska MTSS team. And when I do so, if you're on the screen, if you don't mind waving, that would be really helpful. Lindsay Fryatt. Hi, Lindsay. Lindsay and Christy Fedden. Lindsay and Christy are on today, and they serve regions 1 and 2 in East and Southeast Nebraska. Casey Herner, I think Casey's driving right now, so we don't want to encourage her to wave, but Casey serves Region 3, which covers schools in ESUs 1, 7, and 8 areas. And then I see Claudine Kenneckett is on with us, and she is the regional lead for that central part of the state, housed out of ESU 10. And then I see Tessa Frost, and Tessa provides support for Region 5 in the far western part of the state. And then we have our statewide support as well on our call today. We have Amy Roan from the Nebraska Department of Education. She's our statewide lead. Laura Barrett, who is my partner in coordination of Nebraska MTSS. And then we have Mary Jo McElhose, our kind of quality assurance specialist. And then Amanda Whitty, our Nebraska or our UNL project director. And we also have members of our UNL support team here making sure that our technology does not falter. So as we continue on, you can see on this slide where those folks are located, but it's your lucky day because you're going to get to hear from each of these outstanding individuals. And so next I will share our objectives for the day. And so these are our learning objectives that you can see on the screen. Our learning objectives are very consistent with our Nebraska MTSS mission, and that is to provide support and to empower educators as they prepare students for success by systematically delivering a range of high quality instruction in positive school climates to meet academic and behavioral needs of all of our students. We, of course, accomplished this through a statewide system of regional facilitation focused on partnerships, communication, teamwork, commitment, and accountability, thus ensuring equity for stakeholders across the state of Nebraska. In the next hour, we will remind you of the purpose of Nebraska MTSS and how sessions within the summit have expanded learning for all of us. Our content will connect the resources from the summit to the very important work you are doing to build your school's system around social, emotional, behavioral learning. Finally, we've included ideas of how the Nebraska MTSS team can connect with you further to provide direct implementation support and tools that may be of benefit for your unique circumstances. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jo to talk about the framework and the broader connections.
Thank you, Jane. So here we go. We're going to take the next few minutes of the next hour to give an overview of what Nebraska MTSS is all about, as well as look at the why behind deep implementation of a multi-tiered system of support. And then we will also share about the direction, or a little bit of a change in direction into the unknown with our 2020 summit. So let's dive right into that first objective that Jane highlighted and explore the purpose of Nebraska MTSS by answering the questions on this slide. First of all, what is Nebraska multi-tiered system of support? To review, NeMTSS is a framework used to provide support to all learners. It promotes an integrated system of general education and special education. It provides early intervention for students who need support to reach their academic or behavioral goals. MTSS uses high-quality, standards-based instruction and interventions that are backed by research, addresses students' academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs, so focusing on the whole child, and helps identify students who may need special education. Next, what does Nebraska MTSS encompass? Well, first off, it encompasses that focus on high-quality core classroom instruction, meeting the needs of 80 to 85% of our students without additional intervention. Because I know we've all heard, it's next to impossible to intervene our way out of an insufficient core. We just don't have the time nor resources to be able to sustain this practice. Nebraska MTSS also encompasses response to intervention, or RTI, in the way it was initially intended. It encompasses positive behavior interventions and supports, or PBIS, as well as special education eligibility determination. And finally, what does NeMTSS emphasize? It emphasizes integrated academic, social, emotional, and behavioral core instruction and supports. So once again, that whole child mindset, as well as the all hands on deck mindset in terms of providing that support. Nebraska MTSS emphasizes early prevention and intervention. We don't want to wait for students to fail, but rather we want to be engaging in a continuous problem-solving process around data and taking action to provide needed support to all. NeMTSS emphasizes capacity building for all educators. When our educators have the tools and training they need, it increases their capacity and confidence to do their jobs well and to believe that they will make a difference. So that teacher efficacy is a big component of Nebraska MTSS. And finally, Nebraska MTSS emphasizes examining systems-level data to identify variables that are producing current results. Now let's take a look at the why behind NeMTSS. The framework is built for success. It houses the tools educators need for continuous improvement, problem solving, and decision making. It provides schools with meaningful data to positively impact students and their families, setting them on a path for success, which I believe probably describes the goal of all of us. Many of you, if you have participated in our system training, may recall our toolshed visual, which helps us simplify, customize, and organize your multi-tiered system of support to meet the unique needs of your district, as well as to reflect your current reality. This also emphasizes the importance, again, of the whole child mindset, in which a strong academic and social-emotional core is imperative. Through data-based problem solving, we can continue to layer upon support as directed by what our data is telling us, and constantly reflecting on whether or not what we are doing is working, and if our students are learning what we are intending for them to learn. So as we dig into the framework, it's important to be aware that we have a group of Nebraska stakeholders that have identified the following elements that are essential to implementing and sustaining a successful Nebraska MTSS framework. Those essential elements, as you see on the slide, are shared leadership, which is the green colored box, communication, collaboration, and partnerships, which is the dark red, evidence-based practices, which includes curriculum, instruction, intervention, and assessment, which is the darker orange box, building capacity and infrastructure for implementation, which is the teal blue color, layered continuum of supports, which is the gold colored box, and finally, data-based problem solving and decision making, which is the dark purple box. The colors I mentioned because they are intentional for each element and are represented in our Nebraska MTSS logo as well. There is a link on this slide to our website that gives further guidance and information around our framework that includes these elements. And remember, they are all essential to deeply implemented MTSS. Within our system training days, districts spend a great deal of time learning about these elements and discovering areas of strength as well as areas for growth within each element. Participants also analyze their current teams and plans for evidence of these elements, and in doing this, it helps us determine a focus in our ongoing continuous improvement efforts. Well, we couldn't go on in our presentation without showing some sort of a pyramid or a triangle, right? However, our team really likes this particular pyramid graphic, which is adapted from the U.S. Department of Education, because it demonstrates the essential element of layered continuum of support in a really nice way. It's just a good snapshot of what MTSS is all about. So if you'll notice on this visual, the defined tier lines that we often see on other triangle or pyramid representations are absent, indicating that a child may receive services in all areas of the pyramid at any one point in time, hence the specially designed instruction running throughout the entire triangle. So kids don't live in tiers, and we want to move away from that mindset. Instead, we want to focus on that support being fluid and on a continuum. Again, any one child may need support in a particular area at any given time. There is a continued emphasis here on a highly effective core, again, that is meeting the needs of the majority of our students, around 80 to 85%. Then, through continuous problem solving and analysis, we meet the needs of students who require more intensified support. We wanted to just talk briefly about our 2020 summit and how we shifted directions, as did many of you, to navigate the unknown. So due to the current challenging circumstances we are all experiencing right now with the pandemic, social justice concerns and racial unrest, political uncertainties, etc., it is understandable that we are all feeling uncomfortable and weighed down with all the unknowns swirling around us. We were very disappointed we couldn't gather in person with all of you and our colleagues across the state. But sometimes it takes challenging times and feeling uncomfortable to help us recognize that we had a unique opportunity to address issues and inequities in education and to be an agent for change. Our Nebraska MTSS Summit Committee quickly shifted and began to look deeper at student and educator current needs across the state right now in these difficult times. So you'll see on this slide that we wanted to address these 7 very relevant areas. The first one there, looking at students and educators' needs as we return to learning in our schools, be that virtual or in person. It became very apparent that in order to meet the social, emotional, behavioral needs of students that we are supporting, that we need to also do that with our educators in these areas as well. So again, that oxygen mask reference, in order to make a difference for our students, we must first, as adults, put our own oxygen mask on and meet these needs for ourselves first before we can help our students. Next, MTSS system alignment. During these times, we don't need to think about another thing, another new thing, or buying new things, but rather how can we utilize the tools and strategies and leverage the system that we already have in place that we know works. And MTSS most definitely will benefit schools in making connections and working through each new problem or challenge using a deeply implemented problem-solving process. One of our goals in our summit offerings was to provide resources and information around making connections and aligning your system. Positive and inclusive climate. This one kind of speaks for itself. We believe this is the hope for all of us, that we all feel like we have a place and a purpose and are working toward this positive environment for all. And many of our presenters shared tools and strategies and resources for helping us in this area. And it really leads us right into the next one on our slide, which is relationships and building relationships among staff, students, families, community. It's pretty difficult to have a positive, inclusive climate without strong, supportive relationships. I'm going to speak for myself. I attended just about every summit session, and I'm pretty sure relationships was addressed in some capacity at every single one. Next, when we think about equitable opportunities for all, I think we all know that putting the spotlight on this is long overdue. And considering questions such as, are we analyzing our system-wide data to help us make equitable decisions for all of our student population are very essential right now, and helps us to really think about, again, those that have been historically underserved. The summit presentation by Celeste Malone, kicking off our first week, which was entitled Creating and Sustaining Equitable Systems of Support for All Students, comes to mind here. And if you didn't get a chance to see this one, I highly recommend viewing the recorded session. In fact, all of our sessions were recorded and are now up on our Nebraska MTSS website. So please take advantage and watch as your time permits. And finally, wellness, being a necessary prerequisite to effective instruction and learning, but that it has to start again with the adults. So you'll notice how all of these things are so closely connected with one another. We heard your needs and responded with 6 weeks of amazing presenters, some national and some right here in our own state, to provide you with, again, numerous resources, strategies, and information to guide you in this unknown of coming back to learning and addressing what will be most crucial to our students and educators around their social, emotional, and behavioral well-being and overall mental wellness. Now I'm going to turn it over to Laura, and she will provide us a little more of the why behind the urgent need to offer support in these areas. Laura.
All right, thank you, Mary Jo. As Mary Jo explained, the 2020 Summit was designed to provide social and emotional behavioral professional learning through an MTSS framework to meet the needs of our educators. As we all know, educators have a lot of things to worry about on a daily basis, now more than ever. With the worry comes quite a bit of stress. Per Gallup, in 2014, nearly half of our educators report substantial stress, which is the highest of various occupations. This stress is a leading factor in teacher turnover, which we know is as high as 26%. This stress can also tie into the 10% of educators having clinically depressive symptoms. Unfortunately, this stress could also be why only 39% of teachers reported job satisfaction. Think about that in your buildings. On average, less than half of the teachers feel satisfied within their profession. This is quite alarming. I know it is to me, and I'm sure it is to you. There can also be a tie to our educator preparation programs. With a lack of desire from teachers to enter the field, current secondary students might not feel the connection to the field and therefore aren't pursuing educator preparation programs. Based on a study from 5 years ago, there was about a 37% decline in educator preparation programs. It's essential that educational systems create environments of positivity and inclusion that support educators, especially knowing how much students need support, which we're going to review next. Take a second to look at the statistics on this slide. And in reviewing some of these, we focused on our student populations. It's incredibly alarming, which is why it's imperative that we focus on supporting students in all areas, socially, emotionally, behaviorally, and academically. When districts and schools know that so many students ages 3 through 17 struggle with depression and or anxiety, it's essential for them to create an environment conducive to meeting their needs. Unfortunately, there's been a steady increase in this diagnosis of anxiety or depression. Beyond this, close to 17% of our young children, those are children's ages 2 through 8, are diagnosed with mental, behavioral, and or developmental disorders. When looking at these numbers further, boys were more likely than girls to be diagnosed. And even furthermore, poverty seems to play a role in this diagnosis, since about 22% of children living below the poverty line had mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. So there's no time like right now to assist our youth, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more. Oops. Today's reality requires educational systems to provide positive and inclusive climate to best meet the needs of all learners and adults. In order to do so, it is essential for districts and schools to understand all of the integrated components needed to create this climate, which are all tied to the Nebraska MTSS essential elements. Here in this graphic, you see that. In order for districts and schools to support the various factors that can positively or negatively impact lives of students. Considering that, all educators have a lot to focus on when creating an environment that's positive and inclusive of all students to have their social, emotional, behavioral, and academic needs met. This can include incorporating universal design for learning to promote the multiple means of engagement, focusing on culturally responsive and proficient practices to meet each student where they're at and honor their unique identities. It may incorporate implementing pyramid and early childhood programs, aligning our practices and procedures to provide trauma-informed and restorative approaches within our schools. These are just some of the things that you can consider. There are a lot of pedagogical approaches to consider, and when looking at social and emotional learning. There are also a lot of things to include or to think as when we're thinking about behavioral and academic learning. This is why implementing an MTSS framework to continually address all areas is essential. Furthermore, Nebraska MTSS is working diligently to ensure coherence with the social, emotional, and behavioral learning. We're going to look at that a little bit more here next. And so you may have noticed we've shifted in including, we've been talking about SEBL. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about why the B in social emotional learning. It's important to include behavioral development in social emotional development due to how intertwined they are. We communicate with others socially, we understand our own feelings emotionally, and we act on those two things behaviorally. Ensuring there is an integrated support system to all of our students helps them develop socially, emotionally, and behaviorally. And it's a necessary component when meeting the needs of all learners preschool through 12th grade. When teams integrate social and emotional learning with behavioral learning, there's one team, think of that, one team that is driving MTSS to promote that positive and inclusive climate, focusing first on prevention. There's also an opportunity to model, teach, and acknowledge skills and connect that with our family engagement. When combining the social, emotional, and behavioral learning, teams employ data-driven decisions and actively engage in a problem-solving process, right? We've heard that embedded throughout all of this, a problem-solving process focused for students and staff. With that said, it's imperative for all teams to understand what social emotional behavioral learning is for all within the MTSS framework, because we know we need to ensure that all adults are taken care of before we can take care of the students. SEBL is not a separate entity. It's not something different that we do. It really has to be an integrated component within the learning of our school day and considered a part of our school culture. All students from early childhood through graduation should receive grade and age-appropriate instruction in social emotional behavioral learning skills focused on the identified needs. Adults are a critical component of social emotional behavioral learning, and since it cannot happen without high-quality instruction, there needs to be an opportunity for the adults to learn, teach, and practice these skills as well. These skills need to be continually accessed and modeled by our adults, as well as forging strong relationships with our families, students, and colleagues. We need to have a focus, again, on the proactive approaches of prevention, not just reactive in our punitive punishments. Due to this, having opportunities to explicitly teach the skills and integrating them into daily school environments to be modeled and practiced by everyone in the school allows for that deep implementation of our social, emotional, and behavioral learning, which is essential for that inclusive and positive climate. That being said, we need to consider a few specific things when we are focusing on our adults. And I love this graphic here of thinking about taking care of ourselves first. Mary Jo referenced the oxygen mask. We've heard this analogy. We need to remember, because there are many times that our educational systems focus on adults to learn academic standards and instructional methodology. We also need to make sure that educational systems focus on teaching academic or those same skills for assisting adults to understand their own social and emotional behavioral skills. However, these skills need to be cultivated to best improve the student's social emotional behavioral outcomes. So this is because adults are our primary agents of change, and we need to understand what is happening with our own selves before we can move that on with the students. When adults have that opportunity to cultivate the social and emotional behavioral skills, they're more likely to display patience, empathy, and healthy communication. And I think we can all agree those are all things that we want adults and kids in our schools displaying. When adults focus on their own social and emotional behavioral learning, it allows for a positive and inclusive climate that leads to quality relationships, leading to many other positive outcomes for students, staff, and families, and our educational systems. If you look at this slide here, you see that when we have our educators, when they are exhibiting those social emotional competencies, we see them forming relationships. As Mary Jo mentioned, every presenter that we have heard throughout this our entire summit, we've talked about relationships. When we understand that, have those competencies, we're able to form those relationships. We are able to model this for students who need to see that. But we're also able to implement our social and emotional behavioral learning with fidelity, which is something we want to make sure that we are doing. Those who lack those, that's when we're going to see our negative and rigid classroom environments. We see this seep into there. This is why our educational systems should not underestimate the influence of our adult behavior on classrooms. And we're going to explore that next. So it's not enough to simply acknowledge our strengths and challenges. While being able to see your own strengths and challenges is an excellent first step in self-growth, we must reflect deeper on these skills and develop and implement a plan to grow from both areas for strengths and weaknesses. Example, I might be a good communicator and I might dislike and avoid conflict. It's not enough just to know this about myself. I must identify strategies for myself and use my communication skills to engage in productive conflict. When I merely know, I'm aware, I can only impact some students. However, when I dig a bit deeper and reflect on my strengths, I'm much better equipped to meet the needs of most students. Taking all this one step further, by identifying more of my social, emotional, behavioral strengths, I can leverage those strengths and use them to improve my areas of identified growth through reflective practices by making a personal and professional growth plan, which will really assist me in meeting the needs of all students. This truly demonstrates how impactful the influence of adult behavior can be. So take some time to focus on these will assist districts in being able to assist students within their own MTSS framework. Knowing this, we had created a poll here for you to think about how you could influence this and if you're likely to have this happen within your school. So what I would like you to do is on your screen, you should see a slide here that says how to respond to this poll. And we want to know, what is the likelihood that your district will connect with the NeMTSS team to expand the SEBL practices for staff and students? So you should be able to see the instructions on the top of your screen here. We want to know, how likely is it? We've been talking about all of these things. We have all of this information that we are happy to do. How likely is it that your group will connect with that? So if you go to poll.ev.com/Laura Barrett 842, A, B, C, or D. How likely? Oh, good, we have a definitely out there. See if we can get anyone else to join in on our poll. Likely. One of the goals that we have out of today is really so that you are aware. When Jane introduced everybody, one of the goals we wanted for you to see our faces is to see the team members that we have out here. So in the instance of time, I'm going to move forward onto the next slide, and Christy's going to explore additional resources and explain some of the interconnectedness with the Nebraska MTSS essential elements and our social, emotional, behavioral learning competencies.
All right. Well, thank you, Laura, for providing such an excellent overview of the why behind our virtual series. And also, I have to note that you were also talking and moving slides. So that is outstanding. So as you know, everyone who's here this afternoon, it's not a surprise that we know that from extensive research that it's not enough to think that an hour-long virtual session this afternoon is going to move the needle in regard to equipping everybody with the tools that they need to not only meet the needs of their students, but also to care for themselves. We know this is going to require continued application of learned skills coupled with that direct implementation support, as Laura just referenced in the poll that you took. So the final portion of our time together this afternoon is really going to focus on how to utilize those resources provided through the virtual series, as well as how to access that ongoing implementation support from our team. So on this slide, we're just going to do a very quick recap of what Mary Jo so beautifully described earlier in regard to the essential elements of MTSS, and Laura also just shared as an overview of the SEBL competencies that are so vitally important for all students to develop and effectively utilize throughout their lives. We just can't underestimate the importance of understanding how the competencies connect with and relate to the essential elements. To illustrate this connection, we're going to spend the next couple of minutes exploring how the presenter content from the past few weeks aligns with each of these Nebraska MTSS essential elements. We want to drive home the interconnectedness between this virtual series and the SEBL competencies and MTSS, and to really encourage you to think about those essential elements that are strongly in place in your districts, and as well as those that could potentially need to be strengthened. And at the end of our time together today, we'll share specific ways that the Nebraska MTSS team can collaborate with you around all of those areas that need strengthening. And we encourage you to use the information on the next few slides to identify how you can use the free presentation recordings and materials to strengthen each essential element. So we'll start here with communication, collaboration, and partnerships. And as Laura talked about previously, our virtual series was really intentionally focused on 6 key areas. And you can see those. It's equitable opportunities for all, engaging and strengthening partnerships, adults as change agents, creating a climate of support, strengthening and prioritizing the core, and putting the pieces together moving forward. And you will see that throughout these next few resource slides. So the next slides are organized by Nebraska MTSS Essential Element. On each slide, you're going to find a topic in the If You Are Looking For column that can be aligned to whatever problem your district or building has identified. In the You Can Find It Here column right there in the middle, you'll find links to the corresponding presentation slides and the recorded session. We've also aligned these topics with the SEBL competencies that Laura just described. We intentionally organize the resources in this manner because we really want your team to analyze existing data and select resources that are aligned with your specific area of need. So you can see, for example, on this particular slide, that there are resources aligned to strong communication, collaboration, and partnership among schools, families, and community resources. And the intended outcome is to enhance student success and to strengthen your MTSS framework. So in the interest of time, we're not going to go through each of the next slides because you'll see they're all formatted and organized in the same fashion. I think our point we really want to drive home is that you want to make sure that you are aligning resources to the problem that your team or your district has identified so that you're not just randomly selecting. We wanted to give you the tools to really hone in and to be strategic about that. So with that said, we have a final grounding activity related to this section. And what we would ask is we want you to ponder. I know we didn't spend time digging into any of these resources, but think a little bit about who you would communicate these particular slides with as we look at aligning resources to the essential elements. Who would you communicate with? How would you communicate? And when are you planning to do that? So we invite you at this point to in the chat, make sure that you're selecting to all panelists and attendees and go ahead and answer those questions for us so we start to see how you're thinking about utilizing these resources. We'll take a minute to do that. So we've got some comments coming in. Definitely school social workers and school psychologists would be a great audience to share these aligned resources. District MTSS teams, assessment directors, MTSS leads, all teachers, school PBIS teams, absolutely. Principals, teachers, school staff, administrators. Yes, and our intent definitely is we think about those who have their hands involved with planning and with looking at creating some of the professional learning opportunities. These are just really nicely aligned to specific essential elements. So you can really facilitate some of that strategic PD planning. So more sharing with MTSS, PBIS, and then creating a thoughtful way to roll that information out to the rest of the staff, special education teachers, special ed service providers. Excellent. Wonderful. So again, we wanted to make sure that you had a chance to really start to think about how you can utilize these resources. And with that, I am turning it over to Tessa.
All right. Thanks, Christy. I have the opportunity to share how our Nebraska MTSS team can support all of you. We are driven to carry out our mission, which is to empower schools to support and prepare all Nebraska learners for success. So earlier, Mary Jo reminded us that Nebraska MTSS is a framework that's used to provide support to all learners. So your team is committed to empowering you to make that happen in your districts. And our Nebraska MTSS implementation support team collaborates with ESUs across the state. We continually work to build out partnerships so we can provide the best resources and research-based strategies for districts, buildings, and teams. We are dedicated to providing equitable opportunities for all students and districts. Because remote learning took teachers out of the classroom with students for such a long period of time, and with the uncertainty of the reality of being able to continue in the classrooms currently, and also respecting the hardships of finding substitutes for some districts, in-person MTSS professional development may not happen this semester. We really want to maximize the time that teachers are able to be in classrooms with students. However, we are still committed to assisting our schools, and we are creating new ways to provide ongoing support. The Nebraska MTSS Implementation Support Team continues focus on best practices and evidence-based research to provide specialized areas of support for schools. We've been working on build-out modules in the areas of literacy and social-emotional and behavioral learning. We also collaborate and partner with Pyramid and Nebraska Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support, NPBIS, based on district needs. The topics on this slide are professional development opportunities for districts based on area of need that can be delivered virtually if needed. These are not one more thing to add. They are individualized for districts based on what data reveals as an area of growth. For example, if your data reveals that literacy is an area of growth, your regional support lead will work with you on developing a plan to support that need. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out to your regional support lead, as we are here for you. So the system training days are provided to support districts in developing their MTSS process. And this can include creating a problem-solving model, a communication plan, self-assessment, review of data, and creating your district plan. And the support doesn't stop here. Deep implementation doesn't occur by just attending the system training days. You have to go slow to go fast, and we will continue to support you to help you reach deeper implementation and sustainability of your MTSS process. The literacy modules are offered to help you make connections within your core and tiered supports utilizing current research and best practices with literacy instruction. We're striving to capture the most current and relative research based on science around the best practices in reading instruction. With this information and our own collective experience and capacity as educators, we hope to connect you with some tools and resources that can help you as practitioners understand the why behind these practices and to discern your current reality and make necessary tweaks or changes to your core literacy instruction to increase reading achievement for all of your students. So we have an overview module, as you can see, an early childhood elementary core reading module, and a secondary reading module, and a problem-solving module. Pardon me. If your district is in need of social, emotional, and behavioral supports for staff and students, this professional development would be very beneficial. It expands on building systems of support. So these opportunities would occur consecutively. However, they do not need to be back to back. The first day dives into the premise of social, emotional, and behavioral learning. Part of this is to explore SEBL practices such as culturally responsive and proficient practices, Pyramid, PBIS, restorative practices, CASEL, and trauma-informed care. These practices are then tied to the Nebraska MTSS essential elements to ensure consistency in building supports. Districts and schools would then complete a needs assessment to guide next steps. The second module focuses on the social, emotional, and behavioral well-being of adults. We talked about that, Laura talked about that earlier. Knowing that adult behaviors are one of the most impactful indicators of student success, this allows districts the opportunity to understand and strengthen adult SEBL competencies. And once districts and schools strengthen their adult SEBL competencies, they are better equipped to assist students with their SEBL competencies, which is what the third module focuses on. The third module is divided into early childhood and elementary and secondary. So there will be 2 professional development opportunities within that module. And the final module assists districts and schools in putting it all together within their own unique continuous improvement plans. The pyramid model is a framework based on evidence-based practices that early educators can use for promoting all children's social emotional competence and to prevent and address challenging behavior. The pyramid model is a multi-tiered framework comprised of a continuum of evidence-based practices that are organized in a three-tiered continuum of prevention, promotion, and intervention. When the pyramid model is implemented program-wide through the support of a program leadership team, it can be used effectively within your MTSS framework. Our state implementation and scale-up approach is guided by and incorporates what we know about stages, steps, and key elements of implementation science, including exploration, installation, implementation, and scale-up at both the state and program levels. This visual walks potential districts or ESUs through the steps that are required for sustainability of the pyramid model. And the Nebraska PBIS model falls in line with Nebraska MTSS as well. The levels of support in PBIS focuses on quality core instruction for all students. Some students may need increased support, and this can be done in the classroom or in small groups. Intensive individual interventions are appropriate for students who need additional behavioral support. And now I'd like to turn it over to one of my awesome colleagues, Claudine.
Thank you, Tessa. And as we begin to bring our presentation to a close, we want to reiterate to everyone that we are here to support you and your districts in a variety of ways. Our team has been working diligently to build out various supports that can be tailored to your district's specific needs, regardless of the size. Here you can see a list of potential areas that you may have identified as priorities. Let's take a look at this list. Are you currently working to determine who should be a key player on your problem-solving team? We are ready to support you. Do you need support in designing a strong problem-solving process for supporting individual students? We can help. Are you familiar with the SEBL competencies or need adult SEBL support? We have resources available for you. Do you need resources on building cultural responsiveness and family partnerships? Guess what? We have that too. And there are other areas that your district may, are there other areas that your district may need support? Absolutely. And our Nebraska MTSS team is poised and ready to meet each district where they are at in their implementation process. Along with the trainings I just mentioned, we are more than happy to assist you in other capacities as well. Please feel free to contact your regional support lead if you would like additional assistance in strengthening any of our 6 essential elements or behavioral learning supports. We are here also to provide resources and trainings to support adult self-care and well-being, as well as teaming with you to build a positive, inclusive climate to ensure equitable opportunities for all. We are continuing to support LETRS training as we work with districts statewide to strengthen literacy through the science of reading. We have just begun our first cohort working on modules 1 through 4, as well as continuing to support a group of educators who are in their 2nd year of LETRS. We are also excited to announce that we have 30 educators statewide that will be a part of an early childhood pilot cohort that will begin later this fall. Lots of exciting things are happening across our entire state. Let's take a look at some of the resources that are available to all of you. As I mentioned before, we continue to work diligently on designing supports and constructing them in a user-friendly format. At this time of uncertainty, a virtual platform appears to be the best and safest option. And as you have heard many of our team members already share, it's all about deep implementation of a problem-solving process. Problem-solving is a research-based method that has truly stood the test of time, and it certainly isn't unique to education. We can look at several different fields and professions that utilize problem solving. The medical field, the business world, our military, the list could go on and on. It's also crucial that you have regular time strategically set aside in your district schedule to utilize this problem solving process, as well as having the right individuals at the table, so to speak, for deep implementation. Our team has recorded 2 webinars to support districts in having this conversation for beginning the process of deeper implementation with an MTSS systematic focus. The first that you see here is a guide to understanding, planning, and implementing a daily schedule that supports teaming for problem solving. It also dives into analyzing and improving current learning practices, as well as determining priority actions and creating a plan to reach deeper implementation with problem solving. The second webinar is designed to help understand the importance of a consistent process as well as decision rules. It also shares key components of a balanced assessment system, including screening, diagnostics, progress monitoring, and outcome measures. It also looks at identifying tools for intensified instruction, as well as prioritizing actions necessary for deeper implementation of the problem-solving process. The slide decks for each presentation are also linked and labeled here as supporting documents. You may recall that earlier this summer, our SEL Continuum team presented a series of virtual trainings. This series focused on social emotional learning from an adult perspective and informs participants of best practices that improve school culture, teacher efficacy, and student outcomes. The 5 webinars cover 5 interdependent topic areas that are shown here in gray. These webinars are adapted from the Nebraska MTSS SEL Systems Development Training offered by the Nebraska MTSS team, and serve as complements to the core SEL training provided. Educators of all backgrounds are encouraged to participate in this series to grow in their SEL competency and practice, and you are certainly able to view them in any order you choose based on the needs of your district. You can access the links from this slide deck along with the supporting documents that contain additional embedded resources, or feel free to visit our website at nemtss.unl.edu and click on the Launch Nebraska icon on the introductory page. You will then find a link at the top that says Professional Learning and Resources. Click on that link and the SEL Summer Webinar Series will be available. We have really enjoyed bringing our 6-week virtual summit to you this year. Thanks to the power of technology, we were able to bring you some amazing sessions focusing on social emotional supports for our students, as well as our adults in the trenches day in and day out, whether that be in person or in a virtual format. However, our team is crossing our fingers that we can be in person with all of you next year. So we wanted you to have the opportunity to mark your calendars early for the Nebraska MTSS Summit for 2021. The summit will again be held at the Eunice Conference Center in Kearney from October 5th through the 8th. And our Nebraska MTSS team and Summit Committee will be diving right in to begin our planning for what we hope to be an extremely motivating in-person event. And here we have provided our most recent and up-to-date regional support map and contact information. On this map, you can see the names and emails of the 5 regional support leads across the state. Also included are the ESUs that are represented within each region. We would encourage you to reach out to any of the individuals listed on the slide. We are ready and able to assist you with your individual district's needs. We have a very diversified team in our skill sets and areas of expertise, and we continue to grow not only our team, but our resources. And now I would like to turn it over to Amy Rohn, Administrator and Director for the Office of Special Education at the Department of Ed, as well as our Nebraska MTSS Project Lead. We are not only pleased to have her join us for this presentation, but also to help bring the Nebraska MTSS Virtual Summit of 2020 to a close. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Claudine. Well, as you've seen throughout this presentation and the last 6 weeks, the Nebraska Department of Education, through our Nebraska MTSS team, is committed to serving all of you. We do not intend for this to be a sale job as to why you should join the Nebraska MTSS supports, but rather we want you to know that we are here to support you as you walk through this educational journey and helping to build your system that will overall support your students to grow and learn. Before we sign off, we would like to make a commitment to you to support you in any way that we possibly can. We'd also ask that you make a commitment and take immediate action. So if you would you please share in the chat box what you're going to commit to do? Here are some examples that might work for you. Your next step will be to focus more on your own educator self-care. Maybe your next step will be to bring this information back to our leadership team. Maybe you will connect with regional leads for additional information. Or maybe it's, hey, let's dust off our previous journeys and begin on a new one. On behalf of the Nebraska MTSS team, we want to thank you for attending today's session and all of our MTSS Summit learning opportunities. Each session has been recorded and posted on our Nebraska MTSS website. If there is anything you need from us in terms of support this year, please reach out to your Nebraska MTSS Regional Support Lead. We are here for you. We are all in this together. Thank you again and have a great rest of your school year.